What's the biggest 180 you've seen a person's life take? I knew a guy in college who was a straight A student on track to become a doctor, but he was miserable and burned out. One day, he dropped out, moved to a small town, and started a woodworking business. He's now incredibly happy making custom furniture and says it's the best decision he's ever made. All right, finally, someone who realized that the only vital signs that truly matter are the straight lines and perfect angles of a well-crafted dovetail joint. Yep, you know what's up. Hit me up in the comments with what you're working on right now in your shop. Story 2. I can only speak for myself. I was 13 years old, overweight, sick all the time, prone to violent outbursts, mimicking my biological father, and actively searching the most painless and foolproof methods for ending it all. I started running. At first, I could only make it a couple hundred feet. My ankles felt like they'd burst into flames, but I leaned into the pain because it felt like something other than despair. So I kept running, and within a year, I was fit and found several compelling reasons to live. And I got hopped up on bananas and Diet Cola and ran 13 miles one afternoon like it was nothing. I've fallen back into the pit several times in my life, but I always claw my way out toward the light. Running has always been the fulcrum. I'd be gone without it. Story 3. It's changed a lot since I was 13, but back then it was to get out of my dysfunctional, traumatic family and leave my one-stop-light hometown for college since I was always the quote-unquote smart kid but poor. That hope was enough to keep me up. I did attempt at 18, whole different story, and I've struggled with ideations off and on until about a decade ago, when I finally hit my stride in life. These days, my compelling reasons to live are basically as follows. I made it this far, I've overcome so many traumas, and I know my strength, and know I can exceed it. Even if everyone leaves me, I'll still be me, and I'm a worthy person to be. So are you. So is anyone reading this. I've lost so many dear ones and miss each and every one of them. Story 4. There are people out there that always associate substance fixations with bad decisions. Then you have someone with a stellar career, loving family, no criminal record, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't do any form of substances, works out 6 times a week, and then is on the verge of being promoted to run a company, break their leg while doing an extracurricular activity like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That person then goes in for surgery, is prescribed legally by a doctor a medicine to help recover from surgery. Unbeknownst to them, doesn't know they were prescribed substances that people have ended themselves to escape the fixation, has lost everything now. Fixation to medicine is an experience I do not wish anyone to go through. It never goes away. You just manage it. I wish more people understood this. Story 5. Reminds me of a friend of mine from high school. He wasn't rich, but was a really good kid from a decent family. Smart, quiet, well-liked, totally against any vices. Didn't smoke or drink with us, and we all respected that. He was also a great athlete. When we graduated, he got a scholarship to play college basketball. I was proud of him. Fast forward a couple of years, I see on Facebook he's a struggling user on probation for various property crimes. During the summer after high school, he fell into destructive habits. Instead of going to college, he sold substances and worked under the table at a smoke shop to feed his fixation. Fast forward to this year, and I find out from an old classmate that he passed away from coding long ago. His family never published an obituary, no announcement on social media. Very sad. Story 6. My brother has spent his late teens and mid-20s being a lying, thieving, directionless bum who flunked out of college just by being extremely bright. And one day, he just decided enough was enough. A switch flipped in his brain or something, and he went back to school for electrical engineering, graduated on the top of his class, and has a stable, well-paying career. And his relationship with the family has never been better. I couldn't be more proud of him. Well, looks like someone finally found the right current to swim along in life. Took him long enough to ground himself, but it doesn't matter as long as you get there, right? Story 7. Friend of a friend was big into substances at the time, already a couple years deep. He would regularly play scratchers and would frequently explain how if he spent enough overtime, that he was guaranteed to win sometime. No amount of actual math helped him understand, so after buying his substance, he would happily spend the rest on scratchers. Well, you wouldn't freaking believe it, but that schmuck won 30 grand on a $5 scratcher. He sobered up, bought a car so he could get a better job, and I haven't heard from him in a few years because I moved out, but I see his post every once in a while, is living happily as a nighttime janitor for a school. Sometimes I wish I could explain to the billionaires of the world how 0.00001% of their wealth could completely change a life, but I'm so poor I get crucified for even thinking about having a conversation with one of them. Story 8. I have a journalism degree and a law degree, but I never knew what I wanted to do in life. It all seemed so pointless. And for 8 years, I drove a taxi, got a DUI in my cab, then a second the night of my mother's funeral. 5 years later, a felony. I ended up homeless for 6 years or so. I'd stay with a friend on weekends, but otherwise I was outside. I'd sit up and read at night for want of any place secure to sleep. A little over 3 years ago, I finally got a job as a custodian working nights. In August, I won Employee of the Year and with it, a $1,000 bonus. 10 days ago, I couldn't sleep because my legs were cramping. I'd worked 13 hours to prepare for our school's annual inspection, so I walked to a convenience store. I was also fixated on scratchers. I bought two $10 scratchers. The first is worth $150,000, but I haven't cashed it yet. True story. Story 9. Something happened to a friend of mine in high school. She was a star basketball player and had a knee injury and was prescribed medicine after the surgery, developed into a substance fixation, and she passed away from coding within about 3 years. Absolutely tragic. She had so much to offer the world, and substances stole that from her and from all of us who knew her. Fixation is a witch, and people look down on users, but stories like hers aren't uncommon. It's not always people making a conscious choice to screw their lives up. It happens gradually, and they're often in too deep already before they even realize that it's a problem. Story 10. A friend of mine, good kid, if a bit rambunctious and a bit of a troublemaker, definitely on the track to a solid living as he could fix anything and was always keeping himself busy tinkering with things. Not book smart, but definitely not someone who would struggle to survive if left to his own devices. He was in an accident that left him with a severe TBI, among other things. Long story short, he ended up fixated on substance and was in and out of rehabs and constantly getting into trouble. Good news though, as he pulled another 180 out of his back and is now clean for years. He has a family and though still dumber than a box of rocks, is living the good life. I'm proud of that idiot through and through. Story 11. My niece went from being a user who couldn't take care of her kids and bouncing in and out of jail to a respectable, reliable member of society. There was no fanfare. She just quietly went about changing her life. Most of us had just sort of written her off as a lost cause. My sister, her mother, had actually assumed legal custody of her kids, and she just changed. She did what she needed to do to get her life back on track. It took a while, but it's one of the most amazing and remarkable turnarounds I have ever seen. Story 12. It's real. I've done both arcs. Grew up a victim of severe and chronic mistreatment, had periods of homelessness and experiences of poverty through the teens, but I disassociated it all away and worked to escape this fate. Committed to therapy at uni and made decent strides, ended up later graduating with a master's with distinction in computer science, and in a remarkably stable and healthy long-term relationship. It's an impressive story, I suppose, but in the subsequent years it all went downhill. Escalating mental illness made full-time work impossible to hold down. Therapy availability dropped, ended up in a psych ward for a bit. Turned towards substance misuse, career stalled, childhood PTSD and dissociation intensified, relationships collapsed, ended up secondary homeless, fell into a catatonic depression, basically lost everyone and everything. The success story became a tragedy. I'm at least bouncing back, I suppose. Story 13. Dear friend used to be a self-centered banker crypto bro with unpleasant views on women. He was wealthy at a young age and even had an actual honest-to-God marriage of convenience/trophy wife. He was driving alone on a rural road in the holidays and had a car accident where it flipped. He got some head trauma from that, but also the heat in the car went on and out of control, so it turned into a heat stroke that became an actual stroke. It took him 3 months to get out of a coma. He wasn't good at math anymore and had a soft and friendly personality, like unusually so for him. He also immediately demanded to be given drawing supplies he didn't have a lot of memories of before and still doesn't. He's not rich anymore, is a professional artist now, and he and his trophy wife fell in love for real. He's extremely happy. He threw out all of his business suits, wears exclusively Hawaiian shirts, has a bunch of dogs, is bisexual, and makes ceramics. Story 14. Robert Downey Jr. getting convicted for possession of an illegal firearm and substances, serving 15 months of his originally 3-year sentence in prison. That was in 1996 through 2000. In 2015, the governor of California pardoned him for his actions. Today, he is one of the richest actors on the planet. Fun fact, his son also got into substances at a similar age, was charged for possession, and went to rehab while being very much supported by his father. Story 15. Old friend of mine was rootless and disconnected. She started feeding the homeless and found her calling. I'm proud to have answered her first request for items for the homeless. I sent bundles of gym socks. Now she's internet famous. Her nonprofit is completely driven by donations via social media. She's won several awards. She's provided the connective tissue for many people to move forward. Biggest 180 I've ever seen. Story 16. My brother's friend grew up with a pretty rough home life. As a result, he spent a lot of time at my house, and he more or less became an additional sibling and child in our house. My parents even offered to let him live with us after he graduated high school. Fortunately for him, he was able to get a full ride to a prestigious university. I made friends with a bunch of rich guys there who let him live in their nice shared rental and would often give him experiences or gently used really nice things. He graduated with honors and made six figures out of college. He's since gotten married and made a life for himself in our hometown. I don't know how much contact he has with his family, but he's still close to mine. Story 17. My sister, she had a string of bad boyfriends in high school, and one of them got her into substances. She married a guy after knowing him for 8 days. He was a cruel schmuck who abandoned her, so she turned to her dealer, who she married after her divorce from guy number one. They had a kid and got busted selling substances and storing them under the baby crib. Kid got taken by the state. Sister and husband went to jail. Sister realized she messed up. Sister vows to make a change. She goes to rehab and goes through every step she needs to get her kid back. Use her husband, won't change. Sister gets pregnant with kid number 2 but leaves him before kid number 2 is born. They get divorced. She stays clean, remarried to an amazing guy, lands a good job, and has another kid, 19 years sober. I'm so freaking proud of her. Story 18. I went to college with a girl who was an avid partier, super nice girl, very smart, but every night just got hammered or was spiked on something, was at the club every night. And this was in Miami too. Ran into her the other day after not seeing her in 15 years. Now, super religious, doesn't drink or party anymore, goes on mission trips multiple times a year. I get people grow up and change their habits, but talk about one extreme to another? Story 19. Guy I used to work with, involved in charities, kids, sports, really nice guy and well-liked in the community. Our company even sent him to the 2000 Olympics as a brand name ambassador. We were a major supplier and sponsor. After we were made redundant, he was always interested in sports and sports physio, so he started up a remedial massage business. Fast forward a few years, and he is in court for doing inappropriate stuff to a client. Other clients saw the story, and suddenly over a dozen women came forward claiming everything true, from pillar of the community to doing 14 years in jail. Story 20. Back in March, I had one job, lived in a nice neighborhood, and had few cares in the world. Fast forward to April 2024, my mom passed away, making me the sole financial caretaker for my dad with dementia. His care is $9,000 per month, out of pocket entirely. I now have 2 full-time remote jobs and some side hustles that, without disclosing too much, could potentially get me in serious trouble, but I don't have much of a choice if I have to come up with an extra $9K every month. I moved to a crappy bug-infested apartment in a terrible part of town to save as much money as possible. In the span of a few months, my life went from easy street to something resembling a crappy Breaking Bad knockoff. Story 21. From my own experiences, going back about 12 to 13 years ago, got married, Indian culture, wasn't happy but went along with it. Started great, then the verbal cruelty began. Soon it turned physical, her to me, but I never raised my hand. Went into a slow downward spiral of heavy drinking every day after work, spending up to 6 to 7 hours in the pub just to get away from being home. Lasted about 2-3 years. Finally bit the bullet and moved out, staying with friends and doing overnight shifts. Family didn't want to know me as I'd, quote, disrespected the family name by going through a divorce. Then drinking got worse. I'd subsequently lost my job as a result and legit felt there was no way out. Then, lo and behold, a friend of the family reached out. She was living on rent and offered to take me in, speaking with her landlord who accepted. Moved to the other side of London, got myself a job starting from scratch, done my best to stay off alcohol. Fast forward 10 years, married again for 7 years, got a 4-year-old son and 2 dogs, and a homeowner. Story 22. My life after I took my wife's advice and talked to my doctor about taking antidepressants. That, combined with individual therapy and couples therapy, I didn't see it at first until one day she made a comment that was something like, "It's like you're a different person." Little things that used to set me off and cause me to be miserable for hours or days or nothing. Looking back, it's clear I should have done this sooner. Story 23. Back when I was a young smoker, had a friend, let's call him Stan. I worked with Stan at the grocery store, and Stan, it would turn out, was a pretty big dealer, as in, he had the guts to go to Mexico, and get grass for 50 or $100 a pound, and then drove it back and then sold it in quarter-pound quantities. He cut out a few middlemen this way, and I remember once going into his garage and there were probably a couple of pallets of grass neatly wrapped in plastic. He maintained his grocery store gig and part-time student gig and eventually graduated from college from UTA. He understood low profile and was seemingly pretty careful. Today, he's a preacher, and I know he still has a motorcycle he bought with his grass money 40 years ago. But from the folks I know who still know him, he is a totally straight-laced, no drinking, no substances, nothing. It's part of his story at times, but in 1983, he was the source and the life of the party, LOL. Story 24. I've had many 180s in my life. I did financially okay for my age and had a relatively cushy job in life. Then I joined the military. I did pretty well in the military, but after I got out and had a big career disappointment, I became unemployed for many years. But went back to school and got an advanced degree, which landed me a decent job. In a way, I'm just waiting for the next thing to flip my world upside down again and can't help but feel it'll happen because of my past experiences. One of these days, I'm going to drop down suddenly or find out I have cancer, probably. Story 25. My ex-best friend was the kindest soul. She was literally the epitome of a perfect person. Anytime I needed a shoulder to cry on, she'd be there. Last August, she met a boy. They moved in a month or so later, and ever since she's been with that boy, she's been really nasty, completely flipped. I caught her talking bad about me, saying things about my looks and my relationship. It really hurt. She also gossiped a lot and never had a nice thing to say about anybody. She also turned very toxic and complained that I wasn't doing enough with her when I would see her at least every single week, despite the fact that she'd canceled plans to be with her boyfriend, who she lived with. I made the difficult decision to cut her off completely in February. I have to admit, life's been peaceful since then, but I miss the old her like crazy. I think about her and what she's getting up to all the time. However, in her story, I'm the devil and the crap on the ground for cutting her off. I still cry over our friendship and I miss the old her more than she'll ever know. Story 26. Guy I knew in college, super smart, maybe a little arrogant, but generally a good guy. Pre-med, usually set the curve, got into a great medical school and definitely gave off going to be a future Nobel Prize winner vibes. About a year later, his dad gets arrested for tax evasion or some similar white-collar crime, and the dude completely snaps, drops out of med school, goes down a dark rabbit hole of substances, and ultimately passes away during a confrontation with the police a year later. Story 27. Guy was single into his late 30s, had a great corporate career, got married, sold his house, and started a family, all in 18 months. A few weeks after his daughter starts crawling, he goes to pick her up and ruptures 2 discs in his lower back. Has surgery, comes out in worse pain than before the surgery, and develops clots in legs. Ends up having a pulmonary embolism, which he barely survives, only to be put on large quantities of medicine for pain. Out of work for 2.5 years, can't keep a job, tries to end it all on the way to work one morning, and his engine stalls, which must have flipped a switch. After 7 years of medicine, he detoxes at home by himself, gets clean, finds a job, and has been sober since. Fast forward 10 years, he ruptures another disc and now needs fusion surgery and will do so without taking any medicine. Please say a prayer. I need all the help I can get. Story 28. My best friend, Matt, he owned a home, had 2 dogs he adored and cared for, and had a successful job. He decided to try substances one day in 2022 and it derailed his life. He lost both dogs. They have since been adopted and are well, set his house on fire, lost his job and his car and refused help. He developed paranoia and distrusted family and friends who tried to help him. He passed away in January 2024 after ending it all, and I still have a hard time accepting that it turned out the way it did. He was one of the smartest people I knew and a great friend. Story 29. Dude was an A-plus student with a scholarship going for an engineering degree, smoked grass for the first time and had his first psychotic break. Ended up at our unit unable to hold a thought and left the best we could get him to, which was a stable condition but still with schizophrenia, no previous psych history. Pretty much dropped out of college and is now cared for by his parents because he can barely do his activities by himself. Not sure if he's ever going to finish his degree or live by himself at this point. Story 30. I had this roommate once. She was at a rave every weekend, getting hammered and doing whatever substances come my way, kind of pretty girl. The dude she was seeing cheated on her at EDC in a triad on the Ferris wheel on video after he told her he was celibate for religious reasons. He had taken her to his church, her first time ever attending, the week prior to this. When she found out, she continued to go to his church, met a straight-laced Catholic man, and within a few months was married and living that God-loving life. This girl went from Sullivan King raves and partying hard every weekend, sleeping wherever and taking whoever's substances, to a church first thing Sunday morning kind of person and being a traditional housewife. And if you're enjoying the video, getting a good lesson or two from these stories yourself so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 31. School classmate from a good family that was very well off by local standards. I knew his parents. His dad was cool but didn't say much. His mom is one of the genuinely nicest people I know. He had it all growing up, the cool clothes, the cool car, toys, trips, etc. Went to college for a business degree so he could get a job at the same place his dad worked at and would follow the same career path up to a VP C-suite job. All went well till he was in his early 40s and got caught performing various acts on himself on camera. He did 3+ years out of a 5 to 6 year sentence. He's on the offender registry till he's in his 90s. His big VP C-suite career path went poof. He now lives in a dinky little trailer park and works a warehouse manufacturing job that keeps him away from any kids. Story 32. Son of the district superintendent, took a lot of honors classes with him through high school, honors graduate, scholarship offers, etc. About 9 years after we graduated high school, he was in a news report. Had apparently been involved in home burglaries. Police caught him in the act. He shots at them as he fled. Charges of attempted capital termination, 3 separate trial attempts. Convicted eventually of attempted termination, serving a 40-year sentence. So different from the straight and true honors student classmates we grew up around in our high school years. Story 33. My buddy, 10 years ago, he was fixated on substances, stealing from me to buy more, coded at least twice, but somehow didn't pass away. Finally gets arrested for stealing and is given the choice of 1 year in jail or to do the rehab program, which lasts for a year. He decides to do the rehab program. He did very well. I was the only person there for him as he went through it, and we became friends again. He got back into school, completed his bachelor's. He's now at a great university about to complete his master's in biology and will continue on to complete his PhD. Story 34. This fella I went to high school with was a real knucklehead. Did substances, dealt substances, skipped class. One time he walked into our history class and asked me if he looked straight. His eyes were like saucers. He said he had to swallow a bunch of because the SSO called him to his office to search him, and he felt that taking that much was the best course of action. Fast forward to senior year, he tried out for the cheerleading squad on a dare and made it. Turned out he enjoyed it a lot more than he thought he would and dedicated himself to getting stronger and improving his skills. He cleaned up his act, actually graduated on time, and attended a small college, I think on scholarship, where he was a cheerleader as well. Last I checked, he was sober and working as a personal trainer, which was the last thing I ever expected him to do, but good on him. Story 36. My ex-best friend, great job, adored her adopted daughter, owned her own house. Her first husband left her, and then she started dating and eventually married a guy at work that got her into substances. They both failed tests at work. He passed away from alcohol poisoning, and she started drinking very, very heavily and taking stuff. A few times, her daughter found her and had to call 911. Eventually, her daughter moved in with her father. My friend ended up losing her cat, her home, and every single thing she owned. She used everyone in her life until she had nowhere to turn. She was last seen at a homeless shelter in Texas in February and was saying they were going to kick her out. Some group called Watchmen's Ministry took her in, and she has completely disappeared. I miss my friend. I don't know why she still haunts me. She cut me out of her life very abruptly in 2017. Despite being best friends since 1987. I guess I just want to know why and what happened to her, and I realize I will likely never know, and that drives me crazy. Story 36. For 6 years, I had constant severe heel pain that made me disabled. I walked with crutches. I had to carefully plan every walking route I took. Often, I couldn't make it through a Walmart trip without needing to stop and rest on the floor. I never took my textbooks to class with me because a couple of textbooks worth of weight would make it hard to get through the day. At home, I would often walk on my knees or crawl on the floor. Most of the time, when I could go no further, kind people would help me walk. But sometimes I was just left there on the ground. Saw many different doctors. They mostly thought it was plantar fasciitis, but no treatment seemed to work. Suddenly, one of the doctors got it right. It was a rare nerve disorder called tarsal tunnel syndrome, but unlike carpal tunnel. He diagnosed it by having a guy inject medicine directly into the suspected nerve tube. First time in 6 years, I felt no pain. Soon I got surgery, and once my foot healed, I was amazed that I had basically no more mobility limitations. I went from struggling to make it through my daily activities to dancing for hours at a wedding. The surgery coincided with my university graduation, and I was able to get many seasonal jobs, one after the other, and do biological field work like I had always dreamed of. I tramped through marshes, hiked through deserts, camped in forests, all things that would be totally impossible before. It really was a complete 180. It felt like a miracle, honestly. Now, I always appreciate my health, and whenever I see someone mobility impaired from age or anything, I greatly empathize with them. Talk about a heel turn worthy of a professional wrestler. Good stuff. From crutches to cutting a rug on the dance floor for hours. Wish I could do that. Story 37. My husband's mistress cheated on her wealthy, established high school sweetheart husband for my ex. She was always on lavish trips, going to nice restaurants, and he even bought her a Birkin. She never once had to do her own taxes. He took care of everything financially. My ex is unemployed, likely broke, and has been out of real work for a year so he could run off with her. When they have to work again, his prospects are going to be slim. I'd imagine they are deep in credit card debt right now since both of them lost their jobs. She nuked the life most women dream of, rich and wonderful husband for a fellow cheater and lazy opportunist. Story 38. My wife was working at an auto parts store some time ago. She had this one client that would show up and be consistently irate to everyone who worked with him. He would also show up with a friend who was clearly intoxicated even during the daytime. This angry dude was also red in the face all of the time and heavy-set, and we suspected that it was due to drinking with his buddy. Well, one day, my wife just had enough of his crap and told him off. She made sure to include in her dissection, "You may also want to go see a doctor because you look like you're about to pass away from a heart attack." She didn't see him for some time after that, but when she did, she didn't even recognize him. He had lost more than 30 pounds, wasn't with his intoxicated friend, and was actually being friendly. He approached her at work and thanked her, saying, "You positively saved my life. I actually took your advice and went to see my doctor. Not only was my pressure dangerously high, but I was on the verge of a stroke too." He had changed up his diet, started exercising, and came back a changed man. I imagined some meds too, but I never found out. He lost even more weight after that and was in the best shape of his life. Story 39. I used to work with these two siblings, a brother and a sister, in a restaurant. They were daily binge drinking roommates and basically misused whatever stuff they could get their hands on that day, but at the same time, they were super kind and trustworthy people. I used to walk over an hour to and from that job, and they'd always offer to drive me home even though I saw they could only put $2 to $4 in at a time. I got to know them well enough that I met the sister's husband, who basically did the same as the other two. Well, it turns out he was being put on medications relating to some brain issue he'd had surgery for in the past, and ended up passing away from mixing a new med with alcohol. Then a few months later, his wife coded and passed away, and the brother was left alone. He had no folks left and had been a user for 20 years at this point. He ended up dropping off of the face of the earth and popped up on my social media about a year later. He had gotten sober for the first time since he was a teenager and is trying his hardest to live a healthy life. I hope he can do it. Story 40. Ooh, I want to nominate myself from the ages of 13 to 30. I was a daily user of substances and alcohol. This is how I would deal with my schizophrenia, depression, bipolar, and the beginning diagnosed ADHD. I couldn't care for myself. Daily ideation, multiple attempts. I was a train wreck. Then I had two little girls whose mother was just as mentally unstable as I was, so I went to a mental health rehab. I was there 3 months, and the mother lost custody, so I fought for my rights while in rehab, and I won. I was given my infant and 1-year-old. While I was in recovery, I spent 6 months learning cognitive behavioral therapy and tools for recovery. Now I have my first job ever, my own apartment, my daughters are in school, and I'm a Girl Scout leader. Story 41. We used to joke about it, a running gag that one of us would end up taking up farming as a retirement activity. Unbeknownst to us, a coworker of ours who was a hardcore principal SWE, software engineer, tendered his resignation in the middle of a staff meeting. He just straight up, stood up, said he was quitting, and left. The manager and C-suite executives tried to talk him out of it, but the guy didn't budge at all. Over the next few weeks, we found out he really went through with the joke. He moved out of California to North Carolina to be with his wife and family in Raleigh. He also bought some farmland there or somewhere close to it and started in agriculture and animal husbandry. To this day, we're still surprised by the turn of events. Story 42. My sister used to be married to a giant man-child who literally sat my niece in a bouncy chair in front of the TV so he could watch the game or play PS3, and he was an emotionally and physically cruel schmuck. Once she finally divorced him, she was able to move, get the job she wanted and deserved, go back to school, and meet someone who treats her better. They're engaged now and are about as happy as I've ever seen her. My son's class was one of the ones who got sent digital at a critical point. Halfway through their kindergarten year, things went digital. And because unless the students wanted to attend virtual class or their parents made them, they just mess around on their iPads the whole class time. The school he went to was one of very broken households where oftentimes the kids would be left alone or with an older sibling because both parents had to work just to make ends meet. In about third grade, the kids were so behind they acted out during class because they didn't get it, and the teachers had to dumb down their lessons for them so much my son, very smart, was bored. He saw that behavior all the time and it was normalized to him. He became a very loud, occasionally violent kid because of that. We got him transferred to a different school where the kids actually want to learn and are from better homes, and now my son has such better kids to surround himself with, real friends who actually have and invite him to events and such, and he's much happier because the teachers are able to challenge him and keep him interested. Story 43. I'd have to go with my brother. Within a span of 8 to 9 years, he went from a terrible substance fixation and serving 6 months in jail due to multiple DUIs, which led to a severe mental health crisis that I wasn't sure he'd survive. He finished his first novel in jail, got out, finished his master's, got married, published his first novel, completed his PhD. Then he became a professor, had 2 beautiful children, and worked his way up to dean at the university. He's now started a small business, paid his wife's way through pharmacy school, finished multiple novels and screenplays, and oh yeah, made a movie and is starting on his second. Mostly though, it's just great to have my brother back. Story 44. My husband, we were teen parents and he came from a difficult family, divorce, dad Scientologist, mom mental health. When our daughter was born, we lived an hour apart. He made a lot of bad choices and completely disappeared. I didn't hear or see him for a year. He was homeless and sleeping on friends' couches to find out. I spent the whole year a scared, depressed, single teen mom. Everyone hated him and so did I. Fast forward 10 years and he's the best man and father. We had a second child. He's a changed man, best father and husband. Forgiving was hard, but so worth it. My girls are total daddy girls, and I am spoiled by my hubby. I truly never worry about that time repeating. He reassures me. Story 45. Me, spent my 20s, 30s, and half of my 40s doing substances and breaking the law. 3 trips to prison. My last trip to prison was for 3.5 years. Got out in October 2011 and haven't been back. Have had 2 jobs and have been with my current employer for almost 12 years with a vital position in the company. I have a very nice truck and I got my first mortgage in my late 40s, my dream home. Not very big, but out in the country with 3.5 acres. The only thing I changed was 100% honesty. Every time I got out of prison, except the last time, I told myself that I was done with that lifestyle only to end up doing the same crap. I never told anyone about my past and prison. The stress of constantly living a lie would send me down the same old road with the same ending. This time, I'm honest and it's changed my life. Story 46. A couple of popular girls in my high school were just terrible people, always alternating between starting crap and talking crap. But they were pretty and the world was their oyster. Hot guys wanted them, etc., etc. Basically, mean girls in real life. Sitting anywhere near them in class was excruciating because if they weren't talking crap about you, they were talking crap about all of your friends, knowing they're in earshot and that you could hear them, and they never faced any consequences. If you so much as told them to knock it off, they usually got some football jock to beat on you. For example of how much they took, one of them got pregnant towards the middle of senior year, and she got into a discussion with the school admin about what her plans were after the baby was born. And she just loudly proclaimed that if the baby wasn't cute, she was just going to leave it at the hospital because she just couldn't be seen with an ugly baby. Looks were everything to them. If you weren't a model, then you were nothing. A month or so later, it was prom night. They and some guys all got intoxicated and went driving, got into a terrible accident. They all got seriously injured. The pregnant one lost a baby among some other injuries which disfigured her and gave her a traumatic brain injury. The other one suffered some sort of partial paralysis, couldn't walk or speak after. The one with the brain injury lives at an assisted living home now where one of my nurse friends works. Said she's basically a toddler mentally, needs help eating and wears a diaper, never has any visitors. I remember after it happened, no one cared, no one had any sympathy for them. They were so mean to everyone to the point that even the teachers who would normally encourage us to write letters or take turns talking about our feelings when one of our classmates got hurt or passed away just let it go. It's crazy because you're used to seeing pretty and popular people live life on easy mode, but you take all of that away and suddenly no one cares about them, not even the people you'd think would. Story 47. Full-time substance-fueled idiot with some massive temperament issues and zero sense of fear or consequences. Behind bars multiple times before the age of 20. The The type you might expect end up in jail for termination one day, or that he might run into the wrong person to start crap with and end up paying for it with his own life. Age 22, he had a kid. You expect the typical story. Things go downhill fast, a broken family, a kid growing up without his father. Probably for the best, to be honest. Except that didn't happen. Fast forward, he's now in his late 30s. He's a full-time working man, doesn't do substances, doesn't drink, doesn't get into trouble. He only cares about his kids. I absolutely hated him in my teenage years, but now he's actually kind of a decent guy and a good father. I respect him for turning his life around in such a dramatic way. I never thought it was possible. Story 48. Knew a guy who just retired after 20 years in the Marine Corps. I remember feeling envious of him. Full pension, plus he had an easy, well-paying job at my company. To top it all off, his wife was a corporate lawyer, and they were building their dream home together, and he was a cool guy who everyone liked. A year later, he's in jail facing charges. He had lost his job at my company and was doing construction off the books for an old farmer. One day, the old man showed up with a bunch of cash to buy materials, and this guy harmed him and stole the money. I can only assume his problem was substances. He probably got injured in the Marines, was prescribed medicine, and eventually his use got out of control. Tragic. Story 49. Well, I'll tell you about myself. Until 25, I was poor, overweight, antisocial kind of guy. I lived with my parents, worked in IT, but without perspective. The only sunlight I got in those days, a girl that I met on the internet. We met online when we were 16, and until we were 24, we never met each other in person. There were some personal problems on both sides that we couldn't meet. About 1,000 kilometers was between us, a huge era of so-called virtual love. And then one day I'm like, screw this. I moved away from my hometown. I went to her and started a new life. We started living together, then married. I lost weight, started working on some business. Now I'm 33. From poor, I became rich. From lonely to happily married. Now I can just enjoy my life, live with the one that I love, buy things that I want. It's so good that I can hardly believe it myself. Story 50. There used to be a kid, a teenager in my neighborhood. My brother was friends with him. He was the biggest troublemaker in the neighborhood. He drank, did substances, started fights among his friends just for fun of watching them fight, and if you displeased him in any way, he'd strike out at you in various ways. He once vandalized my brother's car in the middle of the night because my brother turned him down when he asked brother to drive him somewhere. He wanted to travel just for some frivolous reason, but my brother had to turn him down because he already was scheduled to drive other friends. My brother would have driven the kid if he wasn't so busy. Now, if you knew this teen, you'd swear he was looking at a certain future of prison and or early termination. If he managed to avoid either of those, the only thing he had to look forward to was a series of low-paying, going-nowhere jobs. So years go by and the kid and his family have moved away. Brother has an appointment with his doctor. In the waiting room, he meets a girl who he and the teen used to hang out with years earlier. She filled brother in on whatever became of that kid. While still in his teens, he took up a carpentry course in a trade school and with the use of a credit card, started up his own home windows business. How does a teen get approved for a credit card? I applied for credit cards and I couldn't get approved around that time. He was so successful at his home windows business that he bought his mother a very expensive condo. And he services only the homes of rich, wealthy people in rich, wealthy towns and neighborhoods. Meanwhile, it's my brother and I who have had to put up with having a series of low-paying, going-nowhere jobs. I guess life just isn't fair? And if any of these stories got to you, one of them got to me, let me know which one got to you in the comment section below, because I got more for you, and YouTube thinks you're going to love this. So I'll catch you in that video. Thanks for watching.